Another episode of Sharing Wisdom. I'm your host, Angie Wisdom, and today this is exciting because I have somebody on the show with me that's going to kind of take me back to my old days of financial advising, wishing that I had somebody like this in my life back then who could help me put social media out there. Although actually, Matt, when I think about it, social media wasn't even really a thing all the way back then. But Matt Halloran is here with me. He is the co-founder of Be a Proud Mouth, and it's talking about being your own loud. He helps financial advisors have a voice out there to be unapologetically authentic to create the business that they want. Matt, I'm happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is an exciting conversation because, I coach a lot of financial advisors, and one of the things they're always saying is like, well, I don't really have the same ability to market myself and put information out there like every other industry. We're so restricted by what we can say and what we can do. So most of them don't even have social media platforms.
Yeah. Well, first off, that is just a horrible excuse, sister. And it really bothers me because, for instance, Proudmouth is approved at some of the largest broker dealers that have some of the most restrictive compliance departments. And it's very, very simple. If you don't say the stupid stuff that you know that you're not supposed to say, you're going to get through compliance. But when you start talking about performance and you're talking about product and you're not actually sharing people what you teach, which is really how to be themselves and be good with that. And we say this all the time, when you are unapologetically yourself, you have zero competition, and people then feel like they have the chance to know, and trust you much faster.
Which is the name of the game, right? Having people know, and trust you. And it's interesting because now there are so many different ways to connect with people. And you and I have had this conversation where you can almost build that connection before they even meet you, which really, kind of, if you go back to the old school days of saying, oh, well, you have to have 10 touch points before you build that relationship, kind of accelerates you maybe, halfway there of someone really getting to know you. So when you have that first conversation, it's a much different conversation.
Well, it's 20 touches now, which is crazy.
Oh, okay.
And so that actually came out, a little while ago. So there's a great person to follow. His name is Michael Seltzner. He is the Social Media Examiner, which is a weekly bloggy, newsy thing. And they ended up doing a whole bunch of research and found that it is now 20 touches. So you really have to be ever present and omnipresent. Angie, you can't just be omni-channel, which is difficult in our world. And now we exclusively work with financial services professionals. We don't work in other business areas. We will probably expand into accountants and, estate planning attorneys and other heavily regulated industries because of our compliance background. But listen, you can do it at scale. And so that's the most difficult thing that most business owners don't understand is you can say something really smart, right? So you use the Gary Vaynerchuk model of marketing, which by the way, is one of the things that we built our whole program off of, which is say something once and turn it into obscene amounts of content. And that way you don't have to always be organically writing more and more new stuff. We actually, part of our process is rinse, lather, and repeat. Right. And so we want you to repurpose stuff. And in a lot of advisors specifically, and really people who sell their expertise, which would be all of those people that I just described, and I know that you work with, you need to be wildly repetitive. One of my favorite stories to tell is about Nike, because Nike has had the same tagline since 1987. They've been saying the same thing since 1987. And a lot of professionals are like, well, Angie, I need to refresh my brand and change all my messaging. Oh my God. And it works so well, they stopped doing it, is what you and I know happens in our industry a lot. So anyway, so what do you think about what I just said there?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, first of all, the 20 touch points, I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, if someone reaches out to me 20 times, I'm going to die. Please don't reach out to me 20 times. I think that is maybe valid, but also such a archaic and awful way to have to build a relationship. And when I think back about my days, and this is now back in 1997, it was a long time ago. I used to do seminars every single month, brace yourself, and I was very successful at Marie Callender's. I did a seminar every month at Marie Callender's, and people left with a free pie, right? And I built a very successful business doing it. But it wasn't like I was selling them investments. It was just a way for me to get in front of people and connect, get them to know me, like me, and trust me. So I think about that, right? And you've just kind of now given advisors a current day version of how to do this with people. So I'm so interested, and there's so many areas that I want to jump into this on and really give people takeaways around your process and shift their mindset. I think that first thing you said when we started about like, that's such an excuse. We have to kind of rewrite our purpose of getting in front of people. I think, we talked about this a little bit before we got on today. Financial advisors are really taught to sell a product.
Mhm.
We used to have weekly meetings where it was like, here's your fund.
Yep.
Here's the story behind it. Here's how you sell it, right? Here's your bond. Here's your preferred stock. Like everything had the defined features and benefits. So you just sold that to close the deal. It's different now. And what are you seeing? What do you teach people that they need to be selling?
Yeah, advice first and relationship first, right?
Yeah.
So that's all of the focus right now within financial services, and it really is quite all the rage, right? And it's also the experience of the feeling of what happens when you have good advice, and so that's a lot of what the content creators, the advisors that we work with, are focusing on. Do they still talk about Roth conversions and 401ks and stocks and bonds and ETFs, mutual funds? Absolutely, but we refer to that as the sprinkle. Right. So the foundation of the content is, what is it like working with you, that relationship that you used to build, right? What is it like being in your sphere of trust? Because I mean, come on, people had to trust you a lot. They generally give you their life savings to manage. It's a big freaking deal, right? Doctors, your life is in their hands. Estate planning attorney, your legacy's in your hands, and taxes, CPAs, your taxes are in their hands, right? These are hugely important relationships that you have. That's what you need to talk about. So we have something called the perfect content formula. This is one of the things that I want people to write down if they can. So when you're creating content, you need to remember that there's 4 steps. The first thing is you have to tell stories. And this is why you have a successful podcast. This is why we have a successful podcast. This is why you're a successful speaker, and why I'm a successful speaker. We're really good at telling stories. People love stories. And if they see themselves in the story, I'm already a client of yours, right? And that's how they mentally process. We just know this is just the world. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, you have to actually be entertaining. In your content, when you're doing it, it's showtime, especially if you're using video, long form or short form, or podcasts. It's a show. And you should have a pregame. You should know we were just talking about this before we came on. Your lighting has to be good. Your sound has to be good. You have to look the way that you want to look in order to represent your personal brand in the way that you do. So storytelling, entertainment, education. You have to be educational. People are coming to your content to learn something from you. And in 1997, and my children love to say, Dad, that was back in the 1900s, which makes me feel unbelievably old, but it's true. Everything was really gate kept, right? So Angie, you didn't share stuff
Right.
because, no, that's my secret sauce, and whatever company that you work for, that was my secret product and whatever. Well, that's not how the world is anymore. I can Google anything, anywhere, anytime. And in fact, I can chat GPT just about anything. Right now, is it 100% accurate? No, we know that's not. But it sure gets me 50% of the way there. So you have to make sure that you're all of those. Well, this is my secret sauce. If you're an expert and you think that that's something you need to gatekeep, you're wrong. You're going to really lose a substantial amount of business. And then the last thing is you have to have a call to action. This is a great, great, great book by a guy named Dr. Robert Cialdini, The Principles of Influence. And if your readers haven't read it, it's the greatest sales book I've ever read in my entire life because it actually walks through the 7 principles of influence and how to persuade people to like, know, and trust you, and then follow your advice, right? It's a great, 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 great book. And one of the things that he talks about is the principle of reciprocity. So if I give you a bunch of free stuff and a bunch of really great, you actually are socially, contractually obligated to provide in return that favor. You and I are doing a podcast swap. That's a perfect example of the principle of reciprocity. You're allowing me to come on your show. I'm going to have you on our show. You get to say your message to my people. I get to say my message to your people. Win-win. That's how the world works today. So storytelling, education, entertainment, call to action, every piece of content that you write needs to have those 4 components. And if you do that, it is the perfect content formula.
I love it. Simple and easy. I'm going to play devil's advocate on one of them.
Yeah.
You're talking about an industry, and it was funny when a minute ago when you said I might expand into accountants and estate planning attorneys, my mind goes to, you said heavily regulated, my mind goes to the businesses that most people tend to feel like they aren't as sexy, they're not as fun and exciting. So oftentimes people who are in that mindset, and no judgment here, but in the numbers world, they aren't always entertaining.
Sure.
A lot of people don't feel like I'm entertaining. I just have to say what I have to say. I'm educational, but they have a really hard time being entertaining. And then that starts to go, well, you got to show up authentic, so if they're not entertaining. So what advice do you give to people from that standpoint?
Yeah. And I love that you push back on that. And thank you for that. Because when we say entertaining, I mean that you have to be prepared for the show.
Okay.
But it's your show. So like we have some really wonky, nerdy people who are clients of ours, right? They love spreadsheets, pie charts, bar graphs. They love the alpha, beta, gamma, all of it. They love all of that stuff, right? But they allow that passion to come through. And that's all we're asking. Whatever you are, you turn it up 10%. That's the show, baby. That's it. Right. And so, now, once you lean into that and you get more comfortable with that, then actually you don't turn it up as much because you're giving yourself permission. And this is, I know, a huge part of your group coaching program, but we really want you to unapologetically give yourself permission. I'm just going to digress and tell you a quick story. And in fact, I've got the picture over here, which I'm not going to hold up because it's not embarrassing, but it might not translate very well. So when I first left being a therapist and became a consultant in financial services, I thought I had to look like everybody else. So I bought a suit that I couldn't afford, shoes that were far and away more expensive than I should, a watch that I probably never, ever, ever should have bought. My beard was really cropped. My head was perfectly, I don't have any hair, perfectly shaved, little itty bitty glasses. I had it was bam. Looked like everybody else. And then when my partner and I created Proudmouth, one of the first things that we did was we both wanted to finally be ourselves, just really kind of let our freak flag fly. My goal in life is to be a Muppet, which I'm very animated. This is me all the time, by the way. I'm not turning up anything. This is the way I am on every call all the time. And it's so freeing to me. And when people connect with me, so I go to a lot of conferences. You and I were just talking about that before in our pre-record call. But when I go to conferences, people will interact with me and they'll say, holy crap, Matt, I thought that was an act. Nope, this is me. It's a lot, and I know I can be a lot, but this is who I am. This is what I do. This is how I do it. And I'm nerdy as hell, man. If you wanted to dive into the deep, dark recesses of content marketing and podcasting, man, I will nerd out like no other nerd. I can talk to you about my heroes in interviewing and equipment and post-production. I love all of that stuff. But you just have to give yourself that gift as an advisor or a client or an expert to give yourself that freedom of being yourself, because you're going to attract your people. You will. And when you attract your people, then it's not really selling anymore. You're actually having fans buy from you.
I love all that. And, that's something that we connect a lot on, because I too was in that same position, and I still had hair, so I didn't have a bald head, but I didn't wear tiny glasses, but yes, I thought I had to do all of these things, right, to fit the role. And, when I got brought on as a financial advisor, I only had a 2-year degree, and they were insistent upon a 4-year degree. And I fought and I drove the sales manager crazy until he hired me. So I really came in feeling like I need to be somebody else. And I feel like a lot of financial advisors go through that. You're in one of the toughest jobs ever, asking people to trust you with their money. And sometimes after a very short stint in the industry as far as education is concerned. So it's not easy. And this becoming authentic is such a key role, because I know for me, and you probably experience this too with your clients, you end up burning out when you show up as somebody different every single day. Somebody is who you are not. You get tired of it. It's like, when can I be done with this? Do you experience that with your clients, like just burnt out and fed up of being someone else?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and I've coached about 1,000 financial advisors before I moved into the role that I'm now with my partner, Kirk Lowe. I think, and it's interesting because my background is actually as a therapist. And so that's actually what my graduate degree is in, as a therapist. I actually have a master's degree as a life coach, which is very, very rare. And that's actually called masking. So what you're talking about is, and it's generally attributed to people who suffer from autism. Is this unbelievably draining feeling of having to mask because they're not interacting with the world the same way that neurotypical people are interacting with the world, so they have to put on a mask. What a lot of people don't realize is we're always, everybody generally is putting on masks, right? And
Right.
so, and I believe to my core that I want everybody around me to take their mask off. And I think that there are some great techniques, and especially as a financial services professional or a person who sells their expertise for a living, is there are really wonderful techniques that you can use that will let people take their mask off in front of you. And Angie, you know this because you experience this as a coach all day long. When people feel heard, when they feel like you know who they are, everything changes. Everything changes. You're not having to hard close anybody on anything anymore. The implementation quotient of your advice goes up exponentially. Your referrals go through the roof because you've created somebody who's a fan, because everybody in this world is talking or yelling at everybody. Nobody's actually listening to listen. They're listening to respond. And I firmly believe, and this is why we love podcasting as the medium that we use here at Proudmouth, is because it shows your guests you're listening if you follow our systems and our techniques. And so you bring an estate planning attorney onto your show, right? And they feel heard, respected, honored, right? You're their person now. Yeah, I'm going to refer to her for the rest of my life because this is the first time I haven't felt like, it's a bait and switch, and which is that listening to respond, not listening to listen. And so I think you have to show that you're listening in your content. You have to show that you're listening when you're sitting down with clients. If you're doing workshops, if you're doing dinner seminars, if you're doing radio, TV, or whatever, it doesn't matter. You have to show people that you're listening and paying attention. And when you do that, everybody looks at you differently. This actually, and we didn't talk about this in our kind of setup call, but so I do a lot of other people, we call them OPPs, other people's podcasts, right? So it's actually a marketing strategy that works very, very well.
Sure.
I am not as comfortable here as I am in your shoes. I would much rather be the one who's asking the questions than the one who's answering, because, I prefer just sitting back and listening. My grandmother told me, and I know that she wasn't the one who came up with this, even though I do credit her for this. Matt, you were given, 2 ears and one mouth, so you listen twice as much as you talk. And I believe that, and I try to live my life that way.
It's so important to building the relationships. And you and I both know, as a coach, right, asking questions is everything. Everything. Yeah. So it makes total sense. So if we're kind of bringing people down this journey, right, they want a place to build these relationships, to be, to people to know them, like them, trust them. They're stepping into their authenticity. I'm assuming you guys work with people on that part of it as well. with you being a therapist or your, pastorally being in the therapy, coaching, you do a lot of personal development work with them to get them primed to market like this.
Well, a lot of it's attraction marketing too. So we do all of that before they're ever in the sales pipeline with me, right? Because all of our content is rise above the noise, be your own loud, give yourself permission, unapologetically be yourself. We're actually not attracting people who, are, the button up, not wanting to, really let themselves be themselves. And the people
Gotcha.
who do come into our pipeline, who potentially buy and kind of circumvent that, we have whole systems for that. Like we have a podcast grading system. And so after you've done 3 or 4 shows, we actually have a system in place to review those shows to make sure that you're not being too salesy. We have like this 10-point system that we walk them through just to make sure that they're going to, 1, continuously get better behind the microphone and behind the camera, but 2, to start getting more and more comfortable. Now, one of the things I think is vitally important for your listeners, if they're going to start audio or video, because by the way, it's an and, not an or anymore. You kind of have to do both, because YouTube is actually the second largest podcast player in the world. Spotify's number 1. So you do have to have a video component to everything now. You're going to suck. You're going to suck when you start. Doesn't matter how much coaching Matt does or you do or whatever. You are not going to be as great. We've done 480 episodes of the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. I've probably personally done 1,000 podcasts, either interviewing financial advisors or outside of that. Man, you go back and listen to, and Kirk and I were just joking about this a couple of days ago, go back and listen to our first couple of episodes. It was bad. The audio quality wasn't very good. We were recording on Skype. This was 7 years ago.
Oh my gosh,
before
Skype.
COVID. Yeah, it was Skype. Yeah, we did everything on Skype. We had no video at all. In fact, we would have to turn off our cameras because the bandwidth was so bad, so we couldn't even see each other. We were talking over each other, and some episodes were 50 minutes long and others were 15. And I mean, we didn't have everything dialed in. And now 27 minutes, by the way, is the ideal podcast length because that's about how long it takes people to get ready in the morning, the average commute in the United States, how long most people exercise before they have a heart attack, and then also how long it takes for people to cook dinner. And so we know this. And so we know that there's a precipitous drop off of 27 minutes. Now, if you look at our shows, we're really hovering right around that 30 minute mark, and we coach our clients to do the same.
All right. Well, on that note, we've got 5 minutes then. No, I'm just kidding. We better talk fast or anything important we better say in the next 5 minutes. You made me think of something there, and that is kind of the grinding nature of the business. The way you are giving people this opportunity now. Let me rephrase that. You're talking about some things that are totally outdated, which made me think when we continue to do something in a way that is no longer relevant or outdated, it gets harder and harder and harder. So for example, if you're a financial advisor, I used to call out of the reverse directory, literally, right? If you did that now, you'd be pulling your hair out, right? Like it is going to be a lot harder now than it was 20 some years ago. So grinding away, I think there's a lot of financial advisors that are like, man, it is so much harder to get a client these days. Do you have stats? Do you have numbers or any experiences you can share on like how this helps clients really bring clients in easier?
I do. And so I've got, so one of the biggest issues with the content marketing strategy is it's not an A plus B equals C equation. So like when you used to do your workshops, right? So I'm just going to digress very quickly. So you would have 30 buying units who would come in and sit down, 10 of those would make an appointment, 3 to 4 of them, depending on how good are your closing ratio, you would actually close the business, right? And by the way, that's a 30 to 40% closing rate, which is pretty darn freaking good, right? From a sales qualified lead, right? Okay, so whatever. So marketing qualified leads is a little bit difficult, and a little bit different. Marketing has fundamentally changed. And the faster anybody listening to this show who runs a business understands this, the better. You have to market to your ideal client and target market in the medium they prefer while they're there with organic content. You can't keep repurposing other people's crap. You have to create your own. All right. And so because marketing has fundamentally changed, the time horizon has fundamentally changed. It used to be 10 points of touch, which by the way, isn't necessarily direct contact. It's
Sure.
they have to see you 20 times before they consider clicking on your stuff. That's
Gotcha.
actually the statistic there. But you're looking at 12 to 24 months. And so what we recommend for all of our clients is that you continue to do what you're doing now, which is asking for referrals, which is what most people do, and they do it very poorly. And sure, you probably have good systems for that. Workshops, direct sales, buying leads, those sorts of things. You kind of have to continue that engine running while you implement a content marketing strategy over, because content marketing is slow marketing. I am by proxy building a relationship with somebody when it's convenient for them, not when it's convenient for me. There's a huge mindset shift that I really, really wish people do. But there are really great ways to get quick results with this. So the first thing that we recommend that you do is you actually interview people, right? So I'm going to use you and I as a perfect example. So you're giving me the gift of being on your show, which I'm very, very, very grateful for as a fellow podcaster. Your audience has never probably heard of me before, right? So then we do a swap, and I'm going to do the same thing for you, right? So when you interview other people, you get access to their market, because I don't know if you know this, I have about over 100,000 people who follow me on social media. They're all going to know who Age Wisdom is, right? Because, well, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them who follow me, and when they see I'm on another person's podcast, they want to know what's happening, because, again, I don't talk very much on my own show. So you really, really do want to bring on those centers of influence, get them to come on your show. You shine the light on them like you're doing with me now, which makes me uncomfortable, but that's fine. You shine the light on them, and then the price of admission for them to be on the show is they have to promise that they're going to share that show with their entire network. And I'm just going to, since we live in financial services, I'll use that as a very quick example. Sure. Okay, so here's the deal. Like you did, right? So I do some educational workshops, and I talk about estate planning, right? Which is a wonderful way to go ahead and get people to come in, because everybody's afraid of taxes and what's going to happen with legacy. And there, by the way, is this great wealth transfer that's happening, which is $72 trillion. That's going to be, passed down over the next 15 years to our generation, which nobody markets to, but that's a different story entirely. Okay. So I did these educational workshops. Then I have a podcast, right? It's running in the background. I bring on an estate planning attorney. This is actually has happened to 4 or 5 of our clients. They bring on an estate planning attorney, and they're talking about trusts, right? Because that's what an estate planning attorney does. Tax mitigation, transfer of wealth, all of that stuff. And so one of the greatest, and here's a great freebie for any financial advisor who's listening, ask the estate planning attorney if they have trusts in a drawer that they've been paid on, but haven't been funded. And I'm sure, Angie, if you think back to your days as a financial advisor, you're going to know that they have drawers full of trusts that have never been funded, that the estate planning attorney has been paid on. So their job is kind of done, right?
Right.
And you ask the estate planning attorney, well, hey, Angie, what should they do? Well, you know what, Matt, they should probably call you, because I'm sure you have ways to fund trusts. Why, yes, I do have ways to. So this happened. A client had been with us for about 4 months. Now, these are not typical results, because, again, we're a long-term marketing play. But he had been doing all sorts of other stuff, all of these workshops. He did 2 or 3 a month. And so he had this huge prospect pipeline, right? And so he brought on the estate planning attorney. The estate planning attorney, she said exactly what I just said there. The day the episode dropped, he brought in $2.7 million in new assets under management.
Wow.
Because people are like, oh my God, Jeremy, I had no idea. Oh my God, I have $250,000 sitting in a bank CD that's earning nothing right now. And I didn't know what I needed to do. And it just became printing money for him. And so that's how you can utilize this to really grow your client base, to grow your influence, to accelerate your influence, and deepen relationships with your referral partners.
Love it. You really have to think outside of yourself and that instant gratification with a client. That's a different mindset.
It is a different mindset. Sorry, you just said something too that you just totally triggered another small tangent here. It's easier to refer somebody to your content than it is to call my guy, because I don't know about you, sister, but if somebody calls me, I don't pick up my phone. If I don't know who you are, I don't pick up my phone. Are you kidding me? First off, how the hell did you get my number? Right. And secondly, most people don't leave messages, which drives me insane. But I don't generally do that. But I tell people all the time, go ahead and listen to this podcast, follow them on social media. which is difficult to quantify on the back end.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
normally when we get a new prospect coming in, we're not asking all of those follow-up questions. I've got a really good friend of mine. His name is Jimmy Williams. He runs a very, very successful financial services practice, and he brings about $1 million in new assets into his practice a month from his content marketing strategy. And everybody always asks Jimmy, well, how do you know that? He's like, because I freaking ask. So a prospect comes in and sits down and he says, how did you hear about us? Everybody says, I heard from you from Angie. Okay, great. So
Mm.
after you heard from Angie, what did you do? Well, I Googled you. Google, tick, SEO, tick, website, tick, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you follow us on social? Well, I didn't really follow you on social, but I definitely took a look at your LinkedIn profile and your Facebook page. LinkedIn, Twig, Facebook, Twig. All right. Did you watch any of our videos or have a content? Oh my God. Yeah, I watched this video. Chick, right. Well, I knew you had a podcast, but I didn't listen to it. They knew I had a podcast. So we refer to all of those things as the social proof that you need today to be successful as an entrepreneur to market more successfully, but you have to ask those follow-up questions.
Yeah, you have to know, you have to get the data, the details, right, to know that it's working and what you're doing there. So I'm taking a couple of things from that. One, it's a long game.
Yeah.
You got to have patience. This is not an instant gratification. I'm going to, start marketing this way, have a podcast and get clients in. There's really got to be a genuine desire, I think, to really do this long term and find some other value and help other people, right? Help other people coming on your show as well. So you really have to look at it from that different perspective. Yeah. What is the advice when people come to work with you? What are maybe the top one or two things that you tell them that, like, this is something that you're going to need to understand through this process of working with you?
So the first one is just you have to consistently reinforce that this takes a while, right? Because you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. We're terribly impatient. I want everything to be done yesterday, and that's not how good what we call slow marketing really works. So we're constantly reinforcing that component of it. The other thing that I think is really, really vital is a lot of entrepreneurs are wicked smart. Right. And just because they can do something doesn't mean they need or should do that. Right. And so Dan Sullivan, who, I'm sure, strategic coach, he's,
Yep.
the entrepreneurial coach of the world, he's got a whole book called Who Not How. Right. And we firmly believe that giving that control up to somebody else is very difficult for us as entrepreneurs. But as you give that level of control up, you're going to see that you just are so much freer. And then the last thing, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, and so I'm sorry for that, is you have to be you. I can't stress that enough, because if you try to be like somebody else, you just put yourself in competition with somebody else who might be able to outspend you. We joke about that all the time. You're never going to outspend Ken Fisher. You're never going to outspend, Raymond James. You're never going to outspend BlackRock, Ameriprise, any of these
Right.
huge companies. You're never going to outspend them because they're marketing to the masses. And that's the last thing, is you have to have a very specific niche. You can't market to everybody because you're never going to outspend them. So you've got, give yourself the gift of knowing that this is long-term marketing. You have to unapologetically be yourself. You have to make sure that you're showing up and doing a good job. And then you also have to know exactly who you're talking to. And when you have that component to that niche market, everything really, really changes. I've got a friend of mine who just got a huge opportunity to work with podiatrists. And he's like, Matt, so is all of my marketing now going to be focused on podiatrists? I was like, yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, well, what's going to happen to all my other clients? It's like, well, they know that you now focus on working with podiatrists. That doesn't mean that they still can't refer their friends and family. But when you ask them for a referral, the first thing they're going to think of is, who's my podiatrist? And I'm like, I wonder if they're working with him. Ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding.
Yep. He's the foot guy now. That's it.
He's the foot guy now. Yeah. And by the way, we've created some really fantastic marketing surrounding that.
Oh, I'm sure.
There's so many wonderful plays on words that you can use, but you
Yeah.
have to know the language of, in this situation, podiatrists, so that you're speaking and sounding like them, because then they think you're one of them, and you're
Right.
in. So
Yeah. I love it. We started talking about feet and then I lost my train of thought, but You had said something before about that second piece of, you said such a key quote, and I don't want to mess it up, but you said, don't try to be like anyone else, or you've instantly created them as like competition. Say that again for me.
Yeah. So when you try to be like somebody else, you now entered into their competitive world. That's what
That's
just
it.
happened. Yeah. I mean, so if I tried to be Angie Wisdom, because I want to be like you, because I love you and you're amazing and you're brilliant and your products and services are great, right? Now, why would I do that to myself? I'm not you. But we have
Mm-hmm.
such an issue with that in society, and a lot of it
Yes.
has to do with imposter syndrome, right? And I I have twin 21-year-old boys, so we talk about imposter syndrome a lot, because that's a huge millennial thing, by the way, right?
Right.
Uh, and so in Gen Z too. And so, how do you overcome that? In at 21 years old, I wasn't knowing how to be myself, and so I'm trying to instill that in my kids. And as they're continuing to learn more about that, they realize that they're like, Dad, this is so much easier, than me
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
be, somebody else. Now, should you have your heroes? Absolutely. Do you want to emulate other people? Do you want to take, like, I've got 5 interviewing heroes, and every time I
Mm-hmm.
do a, thing, I'm switching between my Oprah techniques to my Terry Gross techniques to my Larry King techniques. I mean, I've got them all because I'm a student of the game. You need to be a student of the game, but I turn those into the Mattness, the Muppetness that I try to embody all the time. And so and that's why I love your group coaching program, right? So it's all over your website, looking at all of this stuff before the call today and before this recording. I love that that's a huge component of what you take your individual clients through and your group clients through, which is to give themselves the tools and the permission, which is what I loved about what
Mm-hmm.
you do, is give them the permission to be themselves. And I don't think there's a greater gift for anybody.
Yeah, it's the easiest one to be, right? We just don't realize it. And I think oftentimes it's because you don't really know who you are. And we'll talk about that when I come on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm
People
looking
aren't
forward to that.
themselves. Yeah, they aren't themselves because they don't know who they are, right? Because they're constantly looking at somebody else trying to be that other person. So I love that quote right there. And I know we're past the 30-minute mark. So I hope somebody exercised or drove a little longer today and heard that quote, because it's everything. Like, when you think about it, who wants to compete with somebody, especially if they're 20 years ahead of you in the game and have a different level of success? That's just crushing. So being able to get in your own lane, be who you are, that's so powerful. Yeah, compete with yourself every day. Absolutely love it. This has been so helpful. Again, I said in the beginning, I wish I would have had something like this when I was a financial advisor, because it's so fun. You and I both know this. We do these podcasts, and it's so fun to be able to sit down and have these conversations. So I want people listening to think about it from that perspective. You can have fun building relationships and building your clientele through this method, right? And that they do have something to say. So all the good nuggets that you've given us and the takeaways, if people want to learn more, how do they know more about you? How can they work with you?
Yeah. So following, I'm very, very, very active on LinkedIn. In fact, I respond to all of my own direct messages on LinkedIn because that's just what you should do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so follow me on LinkedIn, and I provided your team with my link there.
Yes.
But the other thing is so we've got this unbelievable, very broad, robust system that we have built. My partner and I built this over the last 7 years, which is called the Pod Rocket Influence Academy. And what this is a very, very low barrier to entry to begin your journey. And it, by the way, you don't have to be a financial advisor to use this. And you can also have your team members. So if you have marketing support within
Mm.
your office, have them enter the academy. We've got like 34 courses in there. We cover everything from, of course, podcasting, but to from that to video to SEO to websites, branding stuff. Like, really, how do you start solidifying your brand and wrapping your brain around a really good brand? My partner, actually, the reason I partnered with him is because he was a marketing and branding expert in financial services, one of the best. And so we distilled his brain into a couple of courses in the academy, all the way to like our advanced level courses where I teach people how to interview like I've learned how to interview people, which is, by the way, magnificent to help you close more business, but even more importantly, quickly build relationships with people by learning how to listen and ask the right questions. So that's podrocketacademy.com is where you want to go there, or you can just go to proudmouth.com, our website, and find it. But we would love, love, love to be able to have the opportunity to help as many of your listeners as possible on their content marketing, their authentic marketing journey, because that's why you and I are so aligned, because you help them figure out who they are, and then we help them take that and be their own loud.
It's a good combo we got going on here, Matt. You said two things I want to make sure people heard. One, that the information is not just for financial advisors. I mean, and I should have said that at the beginning of the show. Everything that we're talking about here today isn't just for that space, any industry at all. So I love that. And then something else so key, and this is an argument that people bring all the time, is they have a lack of time. And you said, give somebody the access on your staff, whether it's marketing or something. People don't think about that. People who are listening right now, my entrepreneurs, my financial advisors, my business owners, you don't have to be the one who learns all of this.
No.
Delegate it to somebody on your staff to figure it out. And then they will empower you to do the right things. I literally just did that with my EA today, Gabby. I was like, hey, this looks like something you should tune into, right? I'm not going to do it, but we have to start thinking about it from that perspective. You have your own expertise. Everyone who's listening, you don't have to expand that into everything that Matt has here. Delegate that to somebody on your team.
Amen, sister.
Do you get that a lot?
No, unfortunately,
no.
Most people end up the advisors that we work with and the entrepreneurs that we work with are kind of control freaks, and so they think they have to be the ones who do it. But this is why we built the academy, is because so for everything you want in life, you have to be willing to give up something proportionate to that want, and it's time, talents, relationships, treasure, and control. That's it. Those are the 5 things that you can give up. I used to teach this as a life coach all the time. And the big things that advisors and professionals don't want to do is they don't want to give up their time because they don't have it. But at the same time, they don't want to give up their control. And then they have to give up a little bit of money. So your team members, like your EA, right? They're dying for professional growth and development education. We need an entire system to help them learn how to support you as the expert, be able to stay in your lane. And that's everything that we built in place. And we've got a little bit of social proof for this. We've done 7,000 episodes and 75,000 social media posts with 0 compliance issues. And we distilled everything that we've learned from doing all of that into the academy.
Wow. So much value there. Matt, you have been awesome. Thank you so much. For all of those who are listening, whether you need it for yourself or hear this, that somebody else needs to hear it, Matt with Proudmouth, go be your own loud. You guys have it in you. Just show up as yourself. Forward this episode on to someone who needs it. And Matt, thanks for showing up today.
Thank you for having me.